would be to turn on the CD player and listen to the sound of her voice. He had almost called, but then he hadn't. They had exchanged too many harsh words. He could see the fall of her long blonde hair in a clear picture in his mind, the passion and the tears and the endless blue of her eyes. Calling wouldn't do it, not after the way he had shrugged when she had warned that she needed to leave. Go home. He was parked, he realized. He squinted. He thought he was somewhere near Little Italy, and thanked God that he somewhat knew Boston, since he had played it, though he knew almost nothing of the surrounding area. He had flown in and out before. There was a neon light blinking almost in front of him. It was like a flipping miracle. He had gotten a parking space in the city of Boston right in front of a restaurant, or a bar, or something. He couldn't make out the name. It wasn't just his exhaustion. There was a fog sitting over the city. He stumbled out of the car and straightened, blinking. Wherever he was, it didn't matter. He needed something to eat and something to drink. And no matter how desperate he had become to reach Megan in person, he was going to get some sleep somewhere very near. Even if he paid too much for a hotel room. He'd die on the road for sure and take someone else with him if he didn't get some sleep. But first, food and a cold beer. Teresa Kavanaugh left the bar late, and admittedly a few sheets to the wind. However, she was deeply unhappy to realize that she would be walking home. George Roscoe was supposed to have given her a ride home, but that was before George hooked up with the pretty blonde bartender. It hadn't mattered at the time, because Teresa had found the guy at the pool table to be totally fascinating, and she had been certain that he intended to give her a ride home. She had been rather careful not to introduce him to either Sandra Jennings or Penny Sanders, because though they were all co-workers at the office, they weren't really best friends. And even best friends, she had discovered, might hone in on a cute guy a girl met at a bar. She had seen him standing by the table first, chalking a cue stick, but he had no partner. "I'm pretty good," she had told him. "Want to take me on?"
"What are the stakes?"
"We'll gamble a 20.
"I had been hoping for something a little more worth gambling on," he'd said, laughter in his eyes.
"Let's see how we play first," she had challenged, and he had agreed. She'd taken the first game. He'd paid up immediately. They had laughed, they had talked. Maybe she had talked more than she should have, because after she returned from the ladies' room, he was gone, and so was George. And at closing time, she had realized she was alone. So, feeling somewhat irritated, she left alone. Naturally, she looked for a cab, usually available in abundance. But there was so much construction in the downtown area, the cabbies were avoiding the place, or they had already been taken, or perhaps, because of the hour, they had given up and gone home. She could have tried calling, but when she returned to the bar to do so, the doors were locked and no one responded to her banging. She couldn't resort to her cell phone because she hadn't charged the battery. The whole thing had just gone bad. Still, it was all right. There were plenty of lights in the downtown area. Her apartment wasn't that far. And when she started out, it was fine. But then came the fog. She thought she was imagining it at first. Even in Boston, it was rare for a fog to just begin on the ground and swirl to something as thick as pea soup in a matter of minutes. But that was what it did. She could see clearly when she left the bar, but she hadn't gone 2 blocks before it began to churn in puffy blue-gray swirls around her feet. She began to whistle, wondering why fog should make her so nervous. But it did. She could hear the click of her 3-inch heels on the pavement, and that made her wish she were wearing tennis shoes. But she was still dressed as she had been at work, smart business suit with a great A-line shirt, and the tank that she liked so very much. Naturally, she had known they were going to dinner and onward to party that night. Friday night. The workforce lived for Friday nights, or so it seemed in Boston. At least it did at her company. They were a brokerage firm, still a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of company. She was young, ambitious, good at her job, and still, well, young. And she liked to party. And since she and Beau had broken up several months ago,